Speaking of the policies that have been enacted here, it's been a big week for the U.S. running cover for Israeli atrocities, whether it was at the International Court of Justice, whether it was at the UN. And now you have a Republican congressman truly going fully genocidal and saying all that the kids in Gaza should be killed in response to an activist who is pressing him. Let's take a listen to that.
I've seen the footage of
You've seen footage of
shredded children's bodies. And that's my taxpayer dollars. I'm going to bomb those kids.
So I think we should kill them all, if that makes you feel better. Everybody,
So this is Congressman Andrew Ogles. The activist there says, so you're going to bomb these kids. And he says, I think we should kill them all if that makes you feel better.
Yeah, this is another good example of how some of the most insane rhetoric on Israel can often come from the evangelical community. If we'll remember—
Is that this dude's deal?
Yeah, I was just looking it up in terms of Tennessee, in terms of where he's coming from, and in terms of some of the background. It's not altogether surprising because they can often be the most psychotic in their support. And it's also just really crazy. And I don't really understand why a lot of Israelis put up with it. I'm like, you know that they support you and like to the hilt because they believe that the apocalypse is coming and this is going to be like the ground of the second coming. Like if you really think about some of the reasons, super creepy and you're almost a weird pawn in their game. Fine, I will put that to the side. But Andy Ogles, Brian Mast, this coalition, frankly, Mike Johnson falls into
absolutely.
this too. A lot of this is about religious belief. And, whenever religion is concerned and you're thinking with that instead of national interests and other things, that's how you get to a place like— My other thing was, I was like, I wonder if he was just saying it to troll, but I don't think so. I think maybe he was trying to piss them off.
It's disgusting to say it either way. I mean, and if your religious belief leads you to a place of saying murder all the children in a place, that isn't I'm not really Christian, but I was raised around a lot of Christians, and that is not my understanding of the teachings of Jesus Christ personally. But I could be wrong about this. You guys can check out the Bible and see whether that is consistent with the teachings that you may find there. The other piece of this is Rashida Tlaib was literally censured for echoing a rally chant calling for equal rights for Palestinians and Israelis from the river to the sea. That was a subject of mass media coverage. Every Democratic politician was forced to, answer for her and condemn her, and many of her colleagues did so. This man outright calls for the massacre of all of the Palestinian children of the Gaza Strip. And, basically crickets from the media and certainly from the political class. So the blatant double standard here is really astonishing. But it is not only American congressmen who have been catching a lot of attention for their comments with regards to our great allies here, Israel. GALON, who is the Israeli Minister of Social Equality and Women's Advancement, so she is in the Netanyahu cabinet, made some absolutely shocking remarks this week as well. Let's take a listen to what she has to say. I'll read the translation here. She says, I'm personally proud of the ruins of Gaza and that every baby, even 80 years from now, will tell their grandchildren what the Jews did when their families were murdered. Personally proud of the ruins of Gaza, she says. Every baby, even 80 years from now, will tell their grandchildren what the Jews did. Now, keep in mind here that Israel is facing a deadline to respond to the ICJ injunctions against them that both include you got to cut out the acts that led us to determine you were plausibly committing genocide, and you have to stop statements exactly like these that are incitement to genocide, and you have to punish and hold accountable people who continue to make these statements. And here on the eve of that deadline is this cabinet minister saying that she is proud of the complete destruction of the Gaza Strip. Our own State Department was forced to respond to these insane and outrageous comments. Let's take a listen to how Matt Miller handled this particular moment of propaganda on trying to run cover for the Israeli government.
This is not someone extreme. It's not Smotrich. It's not Ben Gvir. This is in Prime Minister's Benjamin Netanyahu's party.
Saeed, I would encourage you to take a close look at the comments the secretary made in Tel Aviv at a press conference 2 weeks ago, where he talked specifically about the effects of dehumanizing language and why it's important that no one on either side of this conflict dehumanize anyone else. That will continue to be our position.
But if the government and the Knesset in Israel don't want the establishment of a Palestinian state.
Again, you have heard the secretary speak to this, that what we will do is continue to lay out what we think the best choice for the government of Israel to make and the best choice for the Israeli people to make. Ultimately, Israel will have to make its own decisions, as every sovereign country does.
Israel will have to make its own decisions. But Saagar, of course, we are so directly implicated in this, since we are providing so much aid every year and continue to expedite shipments of these weapons, continue to block UN Security Council resolutions, continue to argue at the ICJ on Israel's behalf when they weren't even willing to go and defend themselves. But don't worry, the United States of America is there to defend them from allegations of illegality and crimes at the ICJ.
That's what really cuts it from them, is that, at the same time, we're like, well, they can do whatever they want, but at the same time, our entire political system is like revolving around their war and like what they're doing in terms of trying to ship them money. And we have this example here of the U.S. defense of Israel at the ICJ, specifically, using our clout and our sovereignty to try to protect them. Here's what they had to say.
Any movement towards Israel's withdrawal from the West Bank and Gaza requires consideration of Israel's very real security needs. We were all reminded of those security needs on October 7, and they persist. Regrettably, those needs have been ignored by many of the participants in asserting how the court should consider the questions. They have asked you to try to resolve the whole of the dispute between the parties through an advisory opinion addressed to questions focusing on the acts of only one party. The United States disagrees with that this approach would be consistent with the court's role within the United Nations or the established UN framework for achieving peace through negotiations.
So that's what you were just talking about, Krystal. That was a choice by the U.S. government to send somebody and to do that. We could have stayed out of it if we wanted to, but, to specifically go and argue on another person's behalf, you're choosing a side. And it's like, when you choose a side, then you are going to become accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And here's the thing, too, that was particularly outrageous about this moment at the ICJ. I did a monologue about this earlier in the week to set the context for what these particular hearings were about. This is a separate matter from the South African case against Israel alleging genocide. This was even predates October 7th. They're looking for a hearing and a ruling from the ICJ to determine that Israel's occupation is illegal, in part because, one of the laws around an occupation is it can't be permanent. And you have, government after government expanding the illegal settlements. Every single government since the 70s has expanded the settlements, increased the number of illegal settlers. You have government backing for these violent settlers who are going in and pushing through violence Palestinians off of their land. Part of why the October 7th military response from the Israelis was so piss poor is because they had relocated IDF soldiers from the area around Gaza in order to aid and abet these violent settlers, pushing Palestinians off their land. This was already one of the most violent years prior to October 7th with regards to attacks on Palestinians in the West Bank in particular. So that's what this case was about. Now, previously, the U.S. position has been that the settlements are illegal. And so for us to then go and argue and dance around, there was all this dancing around to try to avoid calling the settlements illegal, to try to avoid calling the occupation illegal, really arguing these kind of legal technicalities of like, well, we just don't think this is the place to have these arguments. It really is disgraceful, and especially in the context of what is happening in the Gaza Strip right now. So, the idea, Israel can just do whatever they want. Well, we are so directly implicated here because of all the actions we take on their behalf. And our little, we told them not to dehumanize Palestinians is so utterly pathetic when we are completely unwilling to do anything to back up our words with any kind of action. And also what happened this week, too, the Knesset passed overwhelmingly, by the way, a resolution that is directly at odds with a two-state solution, which is supposedly the policy position of the Biden administration, which is actually part of what Matt Miller was responding to there. We also want to keep our eyes on, potentially devastating situation. Put this up on the screen. This was a good analysis written up in Haaretz. Apparently, U.S. officials are worried that Ramadan may hold the, quote, perfect storm, leading to a regional blowup. The subhead here, Netanyahu's capitulation to his far-right coalition partners over Muslim access to the Temple Mount during the holy month is just one of many factors sparking concern that a major escalation is imminent. So you have these religious hyper flashpoints that always create provocations, especially coming directly from Ben Gvir with regard to Ramadan. So you have that. You also have Netanyahu and co. setting a deadline for their invasion of Rafah, that border town, with all this 1.3 million Palestinians pressed up against the border with Egypt right there. They set a Ramadan deadline for that as well. And it's hard to, you can't really wrap your head around how provocative this is in the broader region and what kind of explosion this could all lead to, not to mention, of course, the suffering that continues for the Palestinians and the way that they will be further impacted here.
I'm very worried about the Ramadan thing. I mean, yeah, as you said, it's difficult to contextualize for people who aren't really familiar with Islamic culture, but to just say it's the holy month is almost, frankly, an understatement in terms of how seriously it's taken. And if there is an idea, there's also a lot of ideas, even within Islam about Ramadan and about like sacrifice and working on behalf of other Muslims, which takes on a lot more extra significance. So anyway, if there is like a mass slaughter that happens during Ramadan, A, it is one that is very impactful, that would be for a lot of the Palestinian population. But really, B, what I'd be the most worried about is that it would ignite some sort of broader regional conflict, because populations in many of these countries would not accept those type of images during the holy month. And it would really instigate for a lot of these people, the Gulf monarchies and other places in particular, to try and push their governments either into the war. Same with the Egyptians as well. So I would not underestimate that.
Yeah,
I really wouldn't.
Indeed. And you have, psycho coalition partners like Ben Gvir, who is just looking for provocation, looking to provoke tension specifically with regard to the Temple Mount. He's apparently ascended the Temple Mount 3 different times since becoming a cabinet minister. Each visit earned the ire of the international community, endangered the highly fraught status quo at the Jerusalem holy site. So you couple that with an already, tense doesn't begin to describe the situation, and you are, as they put it, perhaps heading towards a perfect storm. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.